We are live.
Live Senate Appropriations Committee, April 20th. We are looking at the budget, H 951. We have a couple amendments that for the committee's consideration that we would make on the floor at third reading. I already have a copy of norms. So APFO, Mr. Nixon.
Thank you, Judy Nixon, Joint Fiscal. So the committee should have in front of them a packet with 4 instances of amendments. The first on page 1, this would be taking a pilot special fund appropriation that is currently in the transportation bill, section 6, and adding it to the one-time section of the budget. So you'll see a new subdivision H4, which is appropriations to the Agency of Transportation. This would be a $3 million pilot special fund appropriation to provide additional grants through the General State Aid to Town Highways program.
Okay.
The second instance of amendment is correcting a technical drafting error. This would be striking out the entirety of section B1103 cash fund appropriations and inserting in lieu thereof a new section B1103. I would just flag for the committee the change happening here is on page 2. You'll see in sub K on line 10, page 2, a $500,000 cash fund appropriation to VGS for the Newport Northern State Correctional Facility sprinkler system upgrade. That was a change that occurred late in the process of the capital bill deliberations and was meant to be incorporated into the SAC version of the budget. That was left out. And then sub O on lines 18 and 19, 500,000 for maintenance and renovations at the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility. That appropriation was erroneously repeated twice. So it's just striking that duplicate and then inserting the correct language relating to the sprinkler system upgrade.
That makes sense. We gave them a warning about that one.
And then on page 3, the third instance of amendment would be language, ensuring that there is language in at least one body's version of the budget relating to the base appropriations for the homelessness response continuum. So this language would state that in addition to the 21.18 million one-time appropriation in section B1100 for that continuum, that 61 million is appropriated in sections B316, B321, and B325 of the bill, and that those appropriations are for the same purposes of that continuum. And then a sub C stating that all of those appropriations, any remaining spending authority at the end of FY27 would be carried forward for the same purpose. So this language is just intended to ensure that there is language in the Senate version of the budget speaking to the base appropriations for that, so that any further spelling out of the intent of those appropriations can be added at a later point.
Okay. Any?
Good. We need that language.
It's like we're aware of Senator Lyons.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Great. Did you talk about the discrepancy that was on the floor? No.
Oh, web report?
Yeah.
No. Okay, I can speak to that.
Yeah, I know exactly what.
Okay.
It's fine.
All right.
I mean, we had it oops, and now we will
Well,
have a better process.
I was surprised to get a Louis to go for second reading without that. So,
Right. $3 million. It was mainly the $4 million for the fund or writer's credit. And then there was a couple, $230.
Yeah, you made that tweak, right? Like, you hadn't made the decision. We came in Tuesday afternoon. We said, oh, by the way, you gotta make this choice. It's not in here. And then we made the update on the one online, but we didn't make the updates of the changes, the only one that you guys had, and that's the one we handed out today. So we're gonna catch them.
The number on the highlight sheet was the right.
That's the correct one.
All right.
But I'm making a whole spreadsheet.
Okay. So we're looking at amendments.
Yeah, so, for the committee members who are out of the room for their awareness, there's first instance of amendment that adds in a pilot special fund appropriation to the Agency of Transportation for state aid to town highways, that is currently section 6 of the transportation bill. The second instance of amendment would be replacing the cash fund appropriations section just to ensure that one appropriation that was erroneously left out and one appropriation that was erroneously duplicated, those fixes are made, and that is a net neutral. Both of those appropriations are for 500,000. So just updating the language to the correct appropriation in sub K on line 10 of page 2. The third instance of amendment relates to language surrounding the homelessness response continuum, just ensuring that there's language in the Senate version of the bill that speaks to the intent of the base appropriations. Neither version of the budget bill so far has language speaking to the dollars in the base for H 938. So this language would be added to clarify that the 61.45 million in sections B 316, B 321, and B 325 are also for those services and supports. And then on page 4, the fourth instance of amendment would add 3 sections that are currently sections 7, 8, and 9 of the transportation bill. These relate to adding the local option municipal transportation special fund to statute and placing it in the correct spots for statutory reference. So you'll see in what will be section E 915, sub C, stating that local option tax revenues deposited in the pilot fund in any state fiscal year that exceed the full amount of all payments made under subchapters 4 and 4C, plus any state payments in lieu of taxes for correctional facilities, and any amounts appropriated from the pilot special fund to the Department of Taxes for expenses related to grand list and appraisal assistance, which the committee will recall is an allowable fund under the current budget. 3/4 of that excess amount be transferred to the local option municipal transportation special fund. And then section E 915.1 adds that funds to statute. And then E 915.2, beginning on page 6, adds references to the local option municipal transportation special fund into statute.
The short explanation is everything in this first instance and this fourth instance. Third instance is all from
The first instance and the fourth, yes.
all right. There's the fourth, but I'm not seeing fourth.
Okay, page 4.
Line 6.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Page,
And
what
there's
page?
really no changes from what was done
In the TiVo.
in the TIVA.
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
The wording of the one-time appropriation was simplified.
What one time?
The first instance of amendment, that language does not exactly align with what is in the TiVo.
But the end result is the same, but you changed it over. No,
Yes.
okay. So just for the committee's awareness, this puts these kind of appropriation related items in T-bill into the budget is what the proposal is. So that in budget standards committee, this is part of the appropriations committee talking about the budget, and it's not just transportation office committee. We thought maybe finance was kind of make this switch, but they didn't. So Or making,
I had heard that you would go off the that as an amendment.
yeah, that's what that was my understanding.
Better outcomes from us.
Yeah, probably. And then are you in communication with Hillary? About another amendment, should we add it? Or should?
I believe that has to happen to that bill independently of the budget. And I just heard from Chris Reed, I think that
Oh,
we
right,
a slight update to first instance amendment to include some of that key bill language. So before the committee would vote, I would just take a moment to
So
okay,
correct it.
Senator Westwood.
does everybody get the difference between this and what the question was on the floor?
Probably not.
What this does is moves the money in for all towns into a fund. And it's all towns and it's based on the formula. This, after all the bills get paid out of that, takes that portion of the surplus and does it. What they're suggesting by going to 80% would mean that they all get 80%, whether there's any money in the fund or not.
That could be a problem.
And that was what Andy was. So this gives to all towns, not just the pilot towns. Every town gets money.
Why not just pilot towns? Does their money?
They already get 75%, and that's up from 70. And if you want my crass answer, in a community, in a lot of the communities that are, the people that are working in those towns aren't just from those towns. And at some level, the sharing of this, there's always been restriction, and it was when it started. Are we giving away total tax revenue to a handful of communities and not to everybody? There's only a surplus. The surplus that's left over and hands out to the, and still the host community gets 75%. And they would benefit from the board.
Okay.
We struggled with this a long time in transportation.
But you have the new language? Okay.
Yes, so, this would just be in your amendment, adding in the language beginning on line 8 here. This is already in the T-bill. This language would just ensure that this one-time appropriation isn't factored into any future inflationary calculation.
That's the inflationary calculation of the local roads program.
For the state town highways.
Would you say shall not supplant nor?
Or decrease. Instead of or decrease.
This is just directly pulled from the T-bill. I can circle back with Lunch Council if the committee want updates to it, but I wouldn't feel comfortable tweaking it.
It's going on with the English professor,
Just grammatically.
where we think it should be nor, not or.
You
Either or.
have to consult someone with a law degree or a PhD, I guess, but
Well, we do have an English professor.
Got a couple of words in here, but
Right.
I'm not gonna help you.
Good job.
Okay, well, other than the or being changed to a nor, is the committee supportive of these 4 instances of amendment bill that we would make as a?
Yeah.
So on this, it says, Senator Herzog, would this be do we want to list all the members of the committee? Fine with me?
Sure.
Everybody's okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Bob's nor?
Indicate.
Clubs, lack of indications noted.
What?
You want to have your name on this amendment?
It'll have a de minimis.
Do we need it on there?
No,
By all means, then, if you need it on there.
we don't need it. We would
Well,
like it.
wait, go ahead. put it
Yeah.
on there.
If we're not,
That'll help.
we'll be like, what's
That'll
the
get us.
Yeah, why there's already on.
That'll push it right over.
They'll have to, so we'll call.
Do anything we're doing?
Yeah, but we can't do it as a committee, so we have to list every member as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. So Mr. Nixon will add all name in the committee. And then, so assume if everybody's okay with the name on it, then they're okay voting for it, and I could say that was supported by all seven of us. Okay. So that deals with that. Anything else you have, Mr. Nixon?
Nope, all you've got to do is press printed copy in a moment.
Okay, and I assume Counselor Ray is on her way, or first expected at 2:00? Okay,
That's 7:56.
so we can go on mute. We're back off mute. This is Senate Appropriations, April 28th. We're now talking about H559. And I haven't really looked at it yet, so you, Counselor, can tell us, introduce yourself for the record and let us know why the bill is in our committee.
Happy to. For the record, Hillary Cheddar Ames, Office of Legislative Counsel. H559, this will be draft 1.3. It's a bill about the parole board. So quick reminder that parole means we're talking about someone who has been convicted and sentenced, and parole is a conditional release out of a correctional facility into the community. The parole board is the quasi judicial body that makes that decision. So this bill is all about the parole board. Happy to talk more about what it does related to the parole board. The narrow piece relevant to your committee is related to funding for a legal counsel pilot project for the parole board for the upcoming fiscal year. So the parole board does not have its own legal counsel. In the past, there's been some advice given to the parole board by certain AGs in the AG's office. But testimony taken in the other committees was that there's kind of a conflict there because the AG's office and those AAPs are both advising DOC parole and probation officer. They're authorized to advise parole and probation officers appearing before the parole board. And there's a bit of a conflict in advising the body making the decisions and one of the parties appearing before the body. So it's to create a pilot project for to contract for external legal counsel for the parole board for the upcoming fiscal year. It's a total of $75,000. So there's a $25,000 carry forward from the DOC budget this year that was designated for this purpose. But when put out for bid, $25,000 was not enough. So this adds $50,000 that I believe is coming from elsewhere in the DOC budget. But I would defer to JABO colleagues on how that is happening behind the scenes. But that's the overview. Happy to answer any questions or turn to the amendment.
And JFO staff, the $50,000 is coming, the whole $75,000 is coming from the DOC budget.
Part of it is being appropriated, I believe. And the rest
From
is
the
coming
general,
from
it's
the,
just sort of 25,000 is that they have, and then 50,000 would have to be appropriated.
yeah, it's part of your construct already. It's not one of the.
It's already in our construct.
Yes.
Oh, it's one of the H bills that we have, that the House bill
The
had
house had an in.
for 50,000.
Yeah,
I left all my sheets upstairs.
Both on, the basin at one time. Sheets.
yes, so I believe it's 100,000. total. There's 50,000 for the parole board legal counsel pilot project for the base appropriation. And a 25,000 one-time appropriation to hire external legal counsel to support the parole board, and then use another 25,000 of carry forward for this purpose.
Why are we calling it a pilot project if it's going to the base? Isn't that seem-
Not as familiar with the policy of the bill.
If it's in the base, it was we're gonna fund it every year.
Yes, we've appropriated in the one-time section, so I think if the pilot project is successful, then they would add 50,000 to the base.
There is a report back in the bill. So after, actually, it's already this fall, there's a report back regarding how the pilot project is working. And essentially whether it makes sense to continue with providing legal counsel for the parole board through external funding for an external contract, or whether there's some other way to provide legal support to them. There are also some changes related to parole board budget making in this bill, and how they submit their budget, and there are similar report backs. The bill as drafted, there was the $25,000 carry forward, and then we had placeholder language, 50,000 from the general fund, because House Corrections intended to find that money that they were cutting elsewhere in the DOC budget. So, for example, I think perhaps came ultimately from pretrial supervision, where there was a lot of money allocated, and then I think 50,000 of it is going here. But I'm happy to follow up and clarify that if there is.
Yeah, the fiscal note says it's just $50,000 appropriated for 27. So it's a fiscal note's correct. It's just 50,000. It doesn't say the fiscal note if it's base or one time. It seems like you're calling it a pilot project, it should be one time, not base. But
You're carrying it in a separate bill, it's effectively one. That's how the administration.
okay. Right, because it wouldn't be in the base budget.
Correct.
One time for the parole board. But then sections 5 and 6, the 75 is the combination of 15, 20. Okay, I get it.
Exactly.
Okay. Any questions about this bill from the committee? We have an amendment that was suggested that you can learn about. Playing the amendment.
Happy to. This was an excellent suggestion, flagged by JFO. In Act 74, there is a section 89, that has some general language about how carry forwards are going to be handled. That has some notwithstanding language. So the idea of this amendment is to make sure that the $25,000 carry forward designated for legal counsel for the parole board here gets carried forward for this purpose. So the amendment would notwithstand this section 89, which essentially says it both notwithstands other provisions of law and says that carry forwards shall be subject to the approval of the Secretary of Administration. And there's also this section B, that if any funds not or unexpended on June 30th shall be carried forward and designated for expenditure. So to be clear about the operation of the carry forward in HY 59, the amendment would notwithstand this section 89 of Act 74 and any other provision of law to contrary to be super safe. And then at the end, just some further clarity about, so you have two kind of dueling notwithstandings. And so there's language at the end of this sentence to clarify why there would be a conflict and why this language provides that there isn't. So notwithstanding section 89 or any other provision of law or contrary, the $25,000 general fund appropriated to the Department of Corrections for third-party legal services in Act 27 of last year, or 2025, shall carry forward for the purpose of hiring external legal counsel and shall not be subject to the approval of the Secretary of Administration or designated for any other purpose. So just being clear that whatever Act 74 sets up, carry forward this $25,000 going toward the legal counsel pilot project.
Yeah, makes sense. Any questions? No questions. I would entertain a motion to move the bill with this amendment on.
So moved.
Too late.
Perfect.
I have something.
You can put me on the vote.
You didn't vote.
You don't care.
No, you got it, Weston. Now you have to report it.
Only if you vote for.
I fully
No.
support that.
It's your amendment.
Yes, I can.
I'm
I'll explain the amendment. I'll explain. Today's the 28th.
not, we're doing this as amended.
We're doing this as amendment.
So.
Yeah, it could be, it'll be the committee.
It'll be in the committee report.
What's that? Senator Brew,
Yes.
Senator Brennan, yes. Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator Norris. Yes. Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yeah.
Senator Birchler.
Yeah,
Great, thank you. Senator Westman.
Westman or I can do it.
Well,
You wanna do
whatever
it?
you want. Whatever you want.
Fight over it.
I'll let Westman do it.
went to the LCI.
Yeah, it is.
I'll let Westman do it. The clerk shall record that Westman is the report. Okay,
The chair get boss.
On the amendment to the budget,
yeah,
it says Senator Percy moved the proposal of amendment be amended. But didn't we adopt the proposal of amendment already?
Yeah, in this.
well,
No, on the floor.
well, we adopted in second reading. We haven't adopted the third reading, so it's still not fully adopted.
But it's no longer the amendment to the House amendment.
Oh, we amended we amended the bill.
Right. So
Yeah,
this seems to suggest that we haven't amended it, i.e. second.
what do you think of that, Grady?
The Secretary of the Senate just assured me that the lead-in language is 99.4% accurate and would not tell me what the missing 0.6 was. So I think it satisfies them.
All right.
Maybe the amendment is still there, even though we adopted it as an amendment.
Yeah, fair enough.
I guess that's,
I got to find out about the 0.6.
Yeah, if you do, please let me know. I was curious as well.
thank you.
Don't tell you.
Okay, so that's 8, 5, 9.
We have no secrets.
So here's the important matter before this meeting. We have two other bills, H 814, AI use in health. I think it's AI, not OW, use in health. And then H 67, Vermont Sister State Program. Two bills that I don't think are critical that we passed today. Those attorneys cannot come any earlier than 3 or 2:30. So the committee has to make a decision whether
Adjourn.
wait until 3 or adjourn early and take these up later.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, all in favor,
Chairs meeting.
all in favor of adjourning now and doing these bills tomorrow?
Or Thursday, because some
Thursday.
people aren't going to go.
I,
Norris, you don't want to adjourn? Okay. Right.
or sure, you get your hand up.
Can I bring something up? while we're
Yeah,
still-
yeah.
I just spoke with, Tim Leaders, Dumont and, Lauren outside. And what I was told in reference to Senator Bohowski's question, not knowing about the vacancy savings, is saying, going into this right now, they've hired someone, a deputy state's attorney, and I believe another one is under. He's saying that if in fact they lose their vacancy savings, and I did reach out to Adam, Commissioner Gretchen, if they would have to start having discussions on July 1 as far as termination of 2 deputy state attorney positions by August. I said, even with the Pay Act and the BAA, so you can't maintain them. They were, we're gonna have to, so I don't know where to go from here, is what I'm saying.
Sounds like a conference thing.
Right, could be part of the conference committee. We could also see with the vacancy savings from sheriffs, I don't know if they were counting that because earlier conversation I had with state's attorneys and sheriff, weren't sure they could count those savings to their budget.
He didn't appear to be aware of that sheriff voluntarily not taking his pay out there, so I didn't press that any further.
Right.
But those are still 2 different accounts, so it's just 4 accounts that go through the office. And the state's attorneys and sheriffs don't really, because he oversees both.
Right, well, there's sheriff vacancy savings, state's attorneys and victim advocates. I don't know if they can move vacancy savings between the 3 of those, so.
It could in budget adjustment, potentially, right? So if they had more vacancies in one of those other line items, they could propose to move spending authority between them. I think to the extent they may be fully hired up as of July 1. They have to operate, do you operate under the assumption they will be every position will be fully funded, fully occupied for the full fiscal year, no one leaving any state's attorney's office whatsoever. Now, there may be people leave and they hire them immediately and there really is no gap in payroll. That could happen, right?
That's unusual.
It's unusual though. So I think to your point earlier about budget adjustment, the question for Commissioner Gresham and for them is sort of what type of risk are they, can they take? Ultimately, I don't know that you would get to a place where you would be looking to risk people like that's suggesting ripping people in August to meet a vacancy savings target.
Well, we could add language to the conference saying that they shall not rip folks to meet the vacancy savings and come to VA and be made whole.
Well, and that was part of my question was,
Probably you won't like.
could they make it to BAA?
Yeah, their budget's big enough that they get to BAA.
They get BAA, but,
Yeah.
okay.
It's half the year. Because
So
there's
that's something you could bring up, because Tanya, Senator Bohowski was out there also, so she heard the
right,
answer anyways.
right.
Yeah, they were complaining.
Yeah, we definitely did not anticipate that they would risk employees to meet the vacancy savings. And it's, I think vacancy savings for them is $69,000.
That's hundreds.
So we cut it in half.
We did cut it in half.
Yeah, I mean, it
So
was
it's 330,000 to start with.
Yeah, but that's for all
That-
3.
but that was the administration's.
The Senate's 165, 196.
Yeah,
One 65, that's divided amongst the 3, the sheriffs, the state's attorneys and the victim's advocate.
It's strictly under state's attorney.
Okay. 165.
It was 330 that come through the House
Okay.
to reinstall it, and then we cut it down to 165.
So. Yeah, we could talk about how we do, if they really don't have any vacancy savings, then they would have to rip it to make it. We get that language, I assume, saying that we don't want to permit that we want them to come to budget adjustment. For that.
I think you could suggest they work with the Commissioner of Finance and Management.
Right.
To ensure the payroll is fully funded.
But after conference committee though, right, because But I'm also gonna have the conference.
Right. Yeah, well, that, so we could add,
Right, it's possible in conference committee
right, we might, yeah.
that you fully.
Yeah.
Funded.
So can someone just give me a high level of pay act? When the commissioner said, well, they get the pay act, they get, what does that mean?
Sure, so pay act is appropriated to the Commissioner of Finance and Manager, or the Secretary of Administration to be allocated to agencies and departments based on their pay act need, right? So we budget based on what people's salaries are on June 30 at the end of the prior fiscal year, right? And then pretty quickly into the next fiscal year, the pay act goes into effect and COLAs are added to people's salaries and then folks get steps along the way. What finance management does typically is wait until the end, towards the end of the fiscal year, and then they determine sort of based on your budget, what's actually happened, right? Have you had more vacancies than you budgeted? Have you had fewer? Did you have more people that you hired that had higher healthcare costs, for example, or had higher salary costs? Finance management does an analysis and works with departments to figure out, once you get sort of more through the fiscal year and have an actual experience, then they allocate pay act accordingly. So if the state's attorneys had no vacancies, they could go to finance and management and say, we had no vacancies. We need this much money to meet payroll based on the spending authority and the amount that's budgeted.
So
And
would
then
that be,
finance and management would
would that be
allocate
in
it.
June of this year, Emily, to do that, or?
They do it every,
But what would state laws have to go June of this year to say, listen, this is what's happening now?
they will go for their 26 budget and then they'll go again at 27.
And where those monies come from?
From the pay act appropriation in the F section of the big bill.
We appropriate the whole like $24 million.
Yeah.
And then that's what he was explaining once, like you see the salaries in the book, but if the governor's not taking the full salary,
What's that flexibility?
so they have flexibility to move money around to meet special needs like.
Yeah.
But they could say, hey, commissioners, you're not gonna get a raise this year because we need it for these other issues that can be.
So I guess my explanation, which the good senator already knows on the floor, is spoke to the director of state attorney and sheriff, advised that there's not going to be any, there's a possibility of ripping. But having said that, it's still going to have to go to a conference committee. They can make the adjustments there, whatever else, and we're pretty certain that no one's going to get ripped at this point. No. Well, it's not. Push the kind of
What
here.
percentage vacancy savings is this?
No, we asked at one point, we didn't.
And generally across state government, it's between 3 and 5%.
Maybe it depends on the agency.
Yeah,
Part,
But it,
right.
but that's why I think it's a range between 3 and 5.
I don't know.
Because we got sheriffs, you know.
And the victim that
What's challenging with vacancy savings is a lot of times it depends on the specific agency or department. So some jobs in state government just have higher turnover than others. So then that can drive. Story I always tell when I got to state government, then Natural Resources Board had started 30 years prior and they hired everybody 30 years prior and they all worked there for 30 years and they basically had no turnover for 30 years. And then all of a sudden they all retired. And there was a lot of turnover and I think there has since been turnover. And I think every agency and department for lots of reasons has more or less turnover. And so trying to figure out, right, like, can you just do a straight everybody gets 5% or everybody gets a number versus doing a deeper dive in terms of like how much turnover is there actually going on within that agency or department? And what are the funding mixes in that agency and department?
How many positions in total Amy is there?
in state attorneys.
Yeah.
I'm exploring that.
Well, they have 14 offices.
Well, they have, right now, they have,
Well,
I can tell you, they have 15 vacancies.
They have 15 vacancies
15
now.
vacancies
does that
out
include
of,
those ones they said they didn't know they?
as of last month. Well, that's what I was looking
Okay.
at, but I didn't get there.
They have
They
15
have
now.
199 positions across all their four.
That's sheriffs, state attorneys. and
Yeah.
state conventions. So
So
that's
that's everyone combined.
Yeah,
Crime
199.
victims, advocates,
crime victim advocates, sheriffs, state attorneys. What's the
and
portion?
they have like a central office.
Central admin.
That's for what, right, central office for.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah.
What also can be tricky with vacancy savings is the the sort of cash versus accrual nature of budgeting. There may be an open position, I'll just use JFO, so tomorrow, there may be an open position at JFO that I've hired someone to work in starting July 1. But as of today, that position is vacant, and I'm gonna run every payroll between now and July 1 with that position vacant, which will generate savings. Now, from a like paper perspective, the position is filled, right? But from a cash out the door perspective, I'm not spending those dollars, right? So then you also have to do that sort of analysis where like, yes, the people may be hired, those positions may be filled. But if there's any space in between when that hiring happens and when they actually come on, and any payrolls that run in that time period, you generate vacancy savings through that process. So
Last month, there was 15 vacant.
Yeah, it was 13. Two of them were temps.
13.
Sorry about that.
It's 13, that's combined between victim advocates, state's attorneys, sheriffs,
Yes,
and crime victim services. Is that-
let's see.
But that's it for this fiscal year, so the finance and management would have to allow them to carry that forward.
right, yeah. So yeah, they generate vacancy savings this year, finance and math. That's another place you can fund your payroll, is if you have carry forward from the prior year. When you talk to finance management about justifying whether or not you should keep your carry forward. If you don't think you can make your vacancy savings target, that's a conversation you can
I
have.
would say if they had 13 last month.
Yeah.
You know, to say they're gonna have 0 next year is,
The 149.
Well, I just. Going along with, I can't believe that they're got a large bucket that they can't make it 2 positions until the PAA comes in.
They should be able to make the budget adjustment. Where it gets tricky is if, say, you're in a situation where the budget adjustment gets vetoed twice and the budget doesn't get adjusted until May.
yeah, but you.
Hypothetically, that could happen. That may create that cash flow problems for certain agencies. of the
They can get
department.
that receipts if they need.
There are other ways to get
When
spending.
was the last time that?
I don't know, I can't remember.
Last year.
I can't ever remember that.
What happened last year? Okay,
Wasn't it the previous year that we?
the last year you vetoed the
2025
PA.
budget.
Oh, I was thinking it was when we did the GA.
That was.
That was last year.
That was after.
Just last, yeah. Like my first year as chair. That's what we were fighting over, is the GA.
That's a,
No, the GA.
Yes, that's
That's after Lions go over. That's my, what was that?
Which one?
Well, the $10 million,
H90
H90.
got vetoed last time, but that was after we finished the budget.
What's H90?
It was from last year as a housing bill.
Oh, the H90, that's 91.
That's not.
It was an S90. That was a lot of money. And I had that extra $10 million.
Well,
Well, I don't know.
Okay, well, on a motion,